Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. My name is Kathy, and we are here at the Church of the Palms. Come join us. Thank you for joining us today. So this is the painting we're going to do, and I know that in an hour, 2 hours, we might not have it finished, but the point is I'm going to get you started. Some of you have already worked on your sketch. So this is the photograph I was using. And in the process, well, actually, it's right here. This is the photo. And my suggestions today are draw the negative space. So this becomes what we call the negative space is really the sky. Then we are to get perspective. Well, to do perspective, I'm going to be using my ruler. And what I see when I look at this photograph is the angle, and perhaps this angle is even more severe than the angle I actually gave it. Can you see what I did here? This is also quite severe, and I'm moving. That's because this building is on a different plane, and it is part of this structure. So this is one building coming into a second building. So this one has perspective moving in this direction. This building has movement in this position. So that's why we have this juxtaposition. And often what I do, instead of really worrying about, oh, where's my vanishing point here? Where's my vanishing point here? I just look at what I call the negative space. Now granted, I left a little larger area here. I also made several other changes in this structure. I added my birds, of course, to give it a little life. I show the angle here at the top of this building, and hopefully it's going a little more severe than this, which means that between the two of these, they are moving toward that vanishing point. I also opened this shutter because I felt like having this one closed did not create a sense of openness or a sense of feeling like come take a look at the flowers. So also I felt like these two lines were leading my eye away from the scene, and I wanted it to be more, it just looked like it would feel better. Feel better, look better, be more inviting. So I've made that change. I also created these trees going up into this bottom part of the space because I didn't like the emptiness that I felt that was right here. So I'm going to show you about stonework. Finishing this painting, I will come back to that, but let me show you how I get started. So I do use the ruler, and I do work with my photograph, and to be honest, I tend to just sort of think about dividing my spaces. So in the very, very beginning, I would begin with where this window would be, and I do some very simple sketches. I did want to show that this building has an angle, and that around the architecture of what would be taking place here. And again, this is that shutter. And then if I have that shutter, I'm going to be seeing some of the inside of this window. Again, forgive my quick little sketch, but this would be something that would show the edge of that shutter, and I would be seeing the bottom of that shutter, because the same thing happens here. Now, if I wanted to open this up a little more, I could. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep it as narrow as I see this. This is open here, and I'm just going to let it be showing, and when I come back with the paint, I will draw the lines that suggest the shutters, the shutter panels, like that. So here we have blooms, and part of this is about the flower painting, and also the texture of the building and the perspective of the building. Now, I didn't draw this line all the way down because the flowers do create a border, and then the green that comes in, I'm just going to make that as interesting a line as possible. I don't want this to be, I want it to have a little wiggle in and out. The vines that come up here, and there is stonework that I'm going to be seeing in this area, and this really creeps up to the top. This is sky, by the way. If you are drawing the edge of this building, I'll come back with a ruler. So here I am doing this shape here. Remember what we said about doing the negative space. So if I'm following that idea of negative space, and you can see why I chose to make, maybe I could have drawn that a little further out. So if I'm going to stick with my idea of drawing the negative space, then yes, I do need to make this a little longer. I think I must have shortened mine in the original painting. And then this is underneath that eave, and the line would be here. And then there is this piece of architecture that comes down at more of a drastic angle. And then this edge of the building, and yes, it does angle out. It has to do with the perspective of what you see. So again, I am drawing what I see, and this is my negative space. All right, so this is how I come up with a design. And here I have ironwork with, it's a piece that comes out of the building. It's attached here, and in this beautiful little scroll work that's done in black wrought iron, I have a lantern which is coming down. And this, someone said, I just simply chose to leave that out because it could be a little bit of a distraction. I totally agree, because it's really down here in this corner, and where we want our eye to go is up here. Now we have the windows, and I'm going to sketch the bottom and the top of those windows, and then just sort of map them in. Remember that your lines up and down have to be perfectly straight. They cannot lean. I know this one is leaning, and I could obviously make that straighter. The shutters here, let's see, could I have made that a little bigger? Maybe I could have. And they're hinged, so I like to show how does that work. So this is closed. This one has an open shutter, and then we have a larger opening, and I do see some stonework and an edge, and then the opening is just half. This will all be dark, and then another shutter that would appear here. And again, this would have a hinge here, and the hinges would be here. So I'm plotting now my arrangement, and then I would begin to do a little sketching. And the sketching, now I do spend a lot of time putting in the detail, but for the sake of finishing up today or showing you a lot of stuff, I'm going to show you how I got to this point, and just putting a little bit of stonework in, and also painting my sky. So let me start with that. I would use a big brush, a big flat.
Kathy, could
Yes,
I
ma'am.
ask you, the stone,
Yes.
do you draw some of them and some of them you don't draw?
You know, I took a wonderful class when I was a student, and it was called Child Book Illustration, and they said do not draw all of the stones, just draw a few, and I'm giving you that example right here, and then just use the wash. However, because I like to have the detail, I draw all of the stones. So I think that's an artistic choice that you make. Now, because I mentioned the illustration idea, it's also true that if you have, for instance, I chose to put, you don't really see that rooftop right here, I chose to put that rooftop. So sometimes we make these artistic decisions to, if an illustrator might not put every brick on a building. They would just plot a few of the bricks, just like a few of the stones, and then by doing a color wash over all of that, you get the impression of what those stones look like. So I can give you an example of both, but I would put them in.
So do you put your wash on first?
Yes, I do. But I'm going to start with the first thing that I would do. Whoops, somebody didn't clean their brush. That's me. The first thing I do is always paint what's behind, or try to paint what's behind. In this case, it's the sky. Now, I didn't draw the birds in, but if you're going to have birds, please sketch them first, because you have to kind of paint around them a little bit, unless you can keep the sky fairly light. Now, I can come all the way down on top of that black molding, and I use a flat brush because it allows me to move right up against the buildings. Now I do throw a lot of water on my skies, and I noticed in this photograph that my sky looks very white, very light rather, and that there's not much going on in that sky. There's no clouds. Well, I happen to like to have color. I like to have something going on in my sky, and so I'm picking up, this is my cobalt, and this is my cerulean, this is my ultramarine, nope, sorry, that's Joe's blue, sorry. This is my ultramarine. So I'm throwing in a lot of different blues, even a touch of purple. Not much purple, now be careful. And then I begin with something kind of exciting up here at the top and just move the paint through the sky. And I would leave cloud shapes by just skipping. See, these will be soft edges because the water is just going to blend. So as I move my brush down, I'm trying to keep the sky lighter and just bring a color next to the building. And this way, I also help to lead my eye toward what I want you to look at. And so just a little diagonal feeling sometimes. But see, that's an interesting shape there. I thought I would maybe contain that little cloud piece. And I might sometimes take a little grayness on the bottom side of a cloud. Okay, well, and it's best just to leave it alone and not play with that too much. All right, so my next step would be putting in a color. You ask about the stonework. Now, I don't want to touch where I've done the sky, but I will work with where I have the stones. And I'm going to mix a color that's very pale. Again, it makes sense if I get rid of the blue out of my brush. I'm going to put a little burnt sienna, and I'm going to pick up some of the yellow and a little bit of rose. I want a tannish color, so obviously that's way, way too heavy of a color. So I'm just going to add a lot of water, and by touching a bit of blue, I contain that color to more of a little bit more of a gray. Now, I would say that's a little heavy, and I'm also wondering if I shouldn't make it a little more warm, a little warmer, a little more yellow. And that's a little heavy too. But I'll give my building some character with color. So it is tan, it is a light color, and then of course I haven't sketched at all where my stones are going to be, but I do believe in my pencil lines. And while I'm looking at this very simple color, I'm going to do some of the darker pieces. So I have variations already in place for the stone work. All right, so back to a very lighter wash. I'll finish up where I need to go with this side. And you know, honestly, I'm going to do the same thing over here. But for now, I'm just going to ignore that side and focus right in here for the painting demo today. So there's that's my flowers. Okay, so I do have color showing here. And now, it's interesting that throughout this photograph, I have some nice golden color, beautiful golden color. And I'm going to plop some of that golden color in here because I don't want to forget and paint my pink all over that. I want this bit of golden color. Also, while I'm doing my early washes, I want to get some beautiful greens in here, and because green can go nicely with the blues, and I also think that I can, let's do a clean brush with some of my yellow before I lose that, and get a yellow green, a brighter yellow green here in some of the play that I want to have. I like to build my values. I like to build what's happening in this painting, to have a feeling of light hitting the tops of these flowers, leaves and flowers. So in this case, it's shrubbery, that's growing up. It's supporting. This could be some green of, I'm thinking that these are bushes in front, or trees even, in front of that flowered wall. But as it comes down, I want to be able to delineate where the darks and lights are going to be. So I don't mind starting to introduce some of the darker shapes. And remember that I want to suggest shapes of leaves, with using my brush, but I know that it's just going to be tedious to do that now at this early stage. So I'm going to focus more on just pretty color that underlies what's happening in this bunch of trees or bushes or whatever they are. But whenever I can, I do think I am looking and making suggestions about texture. And because texture, I don't like that. See, that doesn't really, that says paintbrush, and this says leaf. Okay, so there's a difference in how you hold your brush sometimes to get that built, to build that up. And I liked the blue that I had in the sky, and I lost all that blue. I painted them into my greens. I want some of that blue sky to show up in this green. Okay, so there's a lot going on right here that I'll probably make a tree here and another tree here, and maybe there'll be some sprays of something coming up here, but this will be more stonework again. So now I've got to start developing the rest of this, and let's look at the flowers. So again, I did not use I never came back with my ruler, and I definitely would have done that. I definitely would have corrected my sketch with this ruler. And the reason for that is I do want these lines to be straight. I do want this line to be straight. I do want these lines to be straight. I obviously have to have by doing my pencil lines darker, I can get that to be correct. And the top line of that too. All right, so I'm not gonna deal too much with the detail now because I've got to give you some textures. But you see, this is a what do you call it? Tiled roof. So it has those bumpy curves that show up on top of the roof, and then it would be darkly shadowed. And technically, the bumps up here will be bigger than the ones down here because they're moving away from you. If you're just aware of that perspective, it will help. Now, let's talk about the stonework. Every now and then, and I notice that this stonework shows me that there is a linear pattern around the stones more than there is delineation between the colors of the stones. So I'm going to use some colors, some that look kind of gray or a little bit tan or brown and when I say gray, I want to put a little blue in my brown because I don't think they're really red or yellow. And then I want to soften up some of the texture by just taking some water and moving that around. So the textures that I want to give might be on the stones themselves, but I don't want everything to look like the same color. So again, I'm using my pencil drawing to show me where the mortar is between the stones. And then I think what you will get is the feeling that is stonework. So I didn't finish all of the stonework here because it's, again, just putting in, it's kind of like, this has a little more shadow here. This would be coming underneath the flowers in this stonework. So there would be some darkness that would happen just by putting brown and blue together. You get a dark color. And then here, there is this is dark because it's shadowed underneath. And again, I go, maybe that's a little dark. Maybe I need to add a little water to that, so that wouldn't be quite that dark. So again, this is just suggesting these stones by putting in the mortar. I'm adding water to soften that up and push a little color around. And this is like a keystone over the archway of this window, but it did need to be finished here. And it also will draw your attention to this kind of focal point where all the flowers are. Now, back to where, this is building to get to that point. Here I have made this more of an opening because I have opened the shutter, and I'm going to use, to make that really dark, I'm going to add my blue into the brown and let that just sort of run. And it will help to push that depth. I will make a nice dark here in just a moment as well. So let's do the dark that's in this window. So I start with the blue. Let's put a little purple. Let's put a little brown. So I'm making as dark a color as I possibly can. And usually I do it over here on my cool side rather than on my warm side. So this is the dark I want. I want it to look, we call it dark, it's not black, it's not purple, it's not blue, it's not brown. It's just mixing all those colors together to get a really dark color.
Now, which colors did you mix?
I used purple, I used that Royal, it's called Royal, oh gosh.
Prussian?
No, it's a Royal Amethyst. And that's a cheap Joe's color. But if you can make, someone was talking about making purple last week when we were doing the irises, and that is using an ultramarine and a like a alizarin, and that will give you a good purple. So I use a Royal Amethyst, but you could use alizarin and a cobalt or an ultramarine, and you would get a beautiful purple. So what you want, the reason I use purple, if you think about it, is red, blue, and yellow makes dark. Yellow, however, is not as good as brown. So if you take purple and brown, you're mixing red, blue, and yellow. Yes, brown is a mixture of red, blue, yellow. Actually, it's just more orange than it is anything else. So it's getting a dark by using your dark colors. There's another way of making dark, actually, and I think we've talked about it, and I'll do that down here with green and red. Viridian and alizarin or rose madder, either way. So I have showed you how to make the dark, and I'm jumping ahead of myself to get that dark. Let's get the dark in this window, and I'm going to try to leave a little light just to indicate, and this would also be the dark that I use to make the shutter lines. Now, if you have an opening like a window, you don't want the whole thing to be a flat color. You want a little variation. So what could you do? Well, we could stick a little bit. This cerulean is a color that has some white in it, but it also has a sense of maybe something's going on in the room, like there's a source of light happening. Maybe there's a light on in the room, or there's some light that filters in from the outside. It's also good to maybe change that with a warm color and accentuate what's happening here. Also going back to a little dark, this would be the shape of the flowers that are growing up to that window ledge. So I'm just going to make this look like shapes of flowers right there on that edge. Okay, so I've indicated the dark, and now I'm going to start working with some of these lights. I like the dark that I have on those brushes, so I'm going to leave them there. And then I'm going to pick up a flat brush, and I'm going to start with my pinks. So this pink could be an opera. This happens to be my Joe's Amethyst. I'm sorry, fuchsia. I have to remember what my words are, my colors are. Isn't that funny? I do have my words written, I do have my paint colors written here, and the problem is our palette will only hold so many colors, but if you know how, if you're comfortable mixing, by golly, that's just the best way to go. It's just mix and have fun. Now, Sig was pointing out that these bougainvillea, which is, we're pretty sure what we have here is bougainvillea, it has little white flowers intertwined in, now I don't want this to look like a paintbrush stroke, so I'm trying to sort of roll my brush, and also, but I'm leaving some dry brush areas so that I have a feeling of white. And I want this to have a sense of beautiful blooms. And I'm going to be bringing in some darker pink and lighter pink, but it's best to start pretty light to begin with. And right down here, I can even see little tiny pieces of my flowering plants. So I just use my end of my brush. And this comes down, I don't want to cover up all my nice little yellows that I plopped in here to begin with. But I do want these flowers to kind of inch into the greenery a little bit and follow the line as it comes across. And these colors are going to go way up into the rest of the wall, coming here and growing as far as up to the edge and into the sky a little bit. So we start really bright, and then we're going to be coming back with shadowy and changes. There'll be some greens in here too, because there's vines that grow, and there are different variations in the flower itself. So you can see that here I added a lot of purple, and I also made some vines that go in there. But I start this way because the lightest color needs to happen first. Now there are areas for the wall to peek through, and I've not really put any background in to show that, but I can probably come back and do that. So keep going with that. I think I'll stop and not do the whole thing. So let's show how would we develop this color a little darker. And so I'm taking a little bit of the purple and mixing that in with that magenta. I might take a little bit of that rose madder, and now I can begin to, while some of this is still a little bit wet, and I'll have some nice soft feelings going on.
So it was the magenta and what other?
A purple, yes, that I couldn't say a while ago, which is called the royal amethyst. But a purple, by making, and you know, I really should show you the best way to make a little bit of purple. And so if I just clean a little spot right here, I could make a purple with, this is my ultramarine. Nope, that's my Joe's blue. I know that's my Joe's blue as soon as I see it. But any dark blue will do, okay? And then I would take my rose madder or my alizarin, which are going to be basically the same. And look, there's a beautiful purple. So that purple is the same as this purple. It's the same. Okay. Your shirt is purple today, isn't it? It's that color. It is. It's that color. All right. So I don't need Joe's blue on my brush anymore. I'll set it over here. So I can use either purple, and as I move my brush through and look at the photo as you go, what happens is that you start to see places where the flowers, not only do they have the dark spots, but a lot of that is green. And then as that dries, I'll get darker. And let's, this was my dark that I made. I'm going to just use a little bit of my green with that dark. And I will use my, this Skip's green, a lighter green, to mix in. Of course, that could be Viridian green for that matter too. And maybe a little bit of brown. So I'm going to come up with a dark green. That's a lovely dark green. Right here is what I would call a forest green. What would that forest green? Not sap green. Sap green's a little lighter than this, but a what is that? Hunter's green. What's a dark green that you think of? Hooker's green. Thank you. What?
Hunter's green.
Hunter's green is another dark. Yes. So now I'm looking at putting in some darker green, and that's in places even where some of this color of the flower is, bringing some of that green underneath and pulling that around. Now I'm going to begin a little bit of that dark. I'm kind of jumping without putting my intermediate greens in here. So I want some light greens as well. some middle greens, I'm sorry. So I'm getting awfully dark too fast. I want to have 3 or 4 different values of green as I move through this foliage. And to be honest, I just keep building it through this kind of brushwork. Even though I have the middle green, I can come in with more darks and begin to place that. So if I want something to look like it's happening, like this little piece right here is a lighter area, I'm going to soften up some of this with just water. And I do want to accentuate that some patterns, some places are going to be quite dark and some areas are going to get lighter, as though this is right on top and that this is behind. So I have a sense of depth in places and a sense of foliage and leaves, and a lot of that is just thinking as you make your brush work. This is leaf, these are leaves, these are vines, this is going down behind. So I want the sense that some things are behind and some things are in front. And what goes dark suggests that it's behind. And then what is light will suggest that it is going in front. Now right here, I'm going to add some more darks to the flowers. And so then I'm hoping that these flowers will since become the lights on top, the darks underneath, and that the green is pushing back behind these plants, if this is a tree indeed. All right. And then if you use a little bit of water, I can soften this up, but at the same time still have the lighter color on top. So this helps to make the depth that's beginning to happen here. All right, so I want to share what I need to finish up because I know I'll show you a shutter or two. You now have an indication about how to do the stonework and how to get the greenery done. You see where I have added vines, lines to indicate that. And my darks that I would use here and here, I also use here and here. And for instance, let's see, is this my dark? Yes, I think it is. I would have painted this piece coming out of the wall here. And this is a little wrought iron piece that has a curvature to it. Sometimes it takes a little bit more than just one coat to get that to read correctly, and just use your little round brush to create that detail. I need a little bit more paint to get that as dark as it needs to be. I had to add a little blue to that, and a little bit more here. Oh yes, and this line as well. So you just use your little round brush to add that kind of detail. And then let's look at the shutters real quickly. So that finish that. And on the shutters, we have to do a color. So here we have a brown, here we have a pale blue. Then we just add that with a little flat brush. And I would use something as sweet as the cerulean, a very pale wash of that color. Looks like I've got a little green in there. We'll try again. That's what I get for not cleaning off my paint or not cleaning my brushes. Sometimes I have to say, don't do what I do what I say, but don't do what I do. All right, let's lift a little bit of that so we keep it light. And the same thing, this has a bit of a curve shape to it. I think I was not paying attention to my shapes. And then we have the shutters that are here are more of a reddish brown, well, a little orange, and it's not that dark. Those are pale, those are not that dark. So let's just add that color and try to give the shape that we see. And the same thing here. Now I did make this one open.
What color was that?
Well, this is just burnt sienna, to be honest, pretty much straight out of the tube. I might have added a touch of yellow when I did these because I think these are a little bit more orange. So no one's going to see the photograph. Remember that. You can make them purple if you want to. You can make them orange. Just something pretty really matters. Here, I just added a touch more of the yellow in this one. Maybe I like that better. Now I've got to switch, don't I? Now I got to fix this one so that it matches the rest of the shutters. There we go. So once those dry, then I can draw, actually I would have already drawn my lines, and since I can't draw my lines on top of wet paint, I'll have to just do my strokes to show you on the shutters. So this is not dry enough for me to do that, but let's talk about how we go dark for the patterns that happen up here. So we're doing these little tile shaded pieces, and we're drawing lines with the tip of our brush. And sometimes those feel a little hard to do. Whatever you need to do, if you need to turn your paper a different direction. Now because there's a lot of shadowing going on underneath here, I tend to find a color like a blue, gray, something that really just speaks to, I want that to be a little bit more blue. And I got to get the paint off my finger before I put it on my paper. And a little more blue. Well, I made a mess of my palette today. So I know y'all never make messes in your palette, do you? Never.
Oh, no, not me.
I like a blue-purple shadow. I'm not going all the way across. I'm just giving you a color. But sometimes it's kind of nice to say that the shadow will change. In other words, you might just want to soften up some of the color that's happening in your shadow. And because there's stonework here, it really wouldn't matter if I did what I just did, as I like having some variation. Right here, this piece does go behind this wall, so a little variation would be kind of nice there. In other words, I got to make sure I'm not using green on this wall. Let's see. So this is kind of a brown color. So a little dark along that wall is a good idea. And then of course that had to have a little stonework going on in it. This was done earlier where we just put a color on the wall, and now we have to come back and do our drawing of the stones. I am looking at doing a little dark in a few places. Like this would be the open side of that wall, and it probably would have a little brown in it. So I want this to read as though it is opening, and it might have a little extra line right here. It would also have a hinge that would help to delineate what's going on with that window. The open edge of that might be actually lighter. And then when I'm doing my lines, I'm going to use my dark and just draw what you see with the lines of the shutters, and just use the tip of your brush. Somebody said it's really difficult to make these little straight lines. Yes, it is. You just do the best you can with that. I skip a little space there because sometimes those shutters have a sense of there's a little gap there. And then I would do, again, I feel like I have to get my angle just right to start these. Sorry about my back of my head here. To get these started and finish them up. Okay, so that's how we'll do those little lines there. Let's decide that perhaps we're going to call this almost done. I have a lot more work to keep doing with my greenery, but I think that you can sense that this is how I start and this is how I finish. All right? Does anybody have a quick question before we close? It's not finished, but we can continue to get the details and to build our flowers and our greenery and our stones. Have fun with architecture and flowers growing.